Uh-huh. All right, thank you all for joining. My name is Lumumba Akinwole Bandele. I am the Director of Organizing at the Alliance of Families for Justice. So good to see all of the AFJ faces here, and names, if not the faces. Thank you all for joining us today. A few things while we are waiting for our final panelists. One, Akira, can I recruit you?
Absolutely.
Okay, to help me here. Appreciate it. There
Yes.
we go.
Thank you for asking me because I was getting jittery about it.
Oh, good. See, and I saw that. I saw that. Okay, wonderful. As we wait for our panelists, I just wanted to reintroduce myself again, that I'm one of the newer staff members at the Alliance of Families for Justice. And I'm going to be your facilitator this evening. So today we're going to be kicking off a 6-day series of virtual programming in recognition of the 51st anniversary of the Attica Uprising. Attica Yesterday, Today, and No More is the title of this series. We intend to lift up and honor the courage of the men who participated in the uprising, as well as honor the lives of those killed on that day. And we will do this partly by engaging in reflective discussion and presenting what we know is the mandate to finally and permanently shut down Attica. So in this hour, we're going to have a brief yet comprehensive discussion on the dynamics that contributed to the Attica uprising 51 years ago. And we are joined by an esteemed group of panelists for this evening. And I want to start just by introducing the two that are with us right now. We are joined by the Executive Director of AFJ, Safia Elijah, longtime attorney, troublemaker, organizer. She has her name all over a lot of victories throughout the state and throughout the country. Former law professor. And so we want to welcome Safia Elijah. And then we are also joined by a professor and historian at the University of Michigan and a Pulitzer Prize and Bancroft Prize winning author of Blood in the Water, the Attica Prison Uprising of 1971 and its legacy, Ms. Heather Ann Thompson. So thank you both for joining us. And we are waiting to get joined by Mr. Tyrone Larkins, who I have on the phone. Can you hear me, brother? It did not. Okay. All right. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put you on speaker. All right. All right. So we're going to do this. I hope you all, we're going to do what's called an audible. Literally, as Brother Tyrone attempts to join by video, he is going to be joining audibly right now. Brother Tyrone, are you able to hear?
I hear everything.
Okay. Are you all able to hear him? Wonderful. Yeah. All right. So we're going to do it this way. Brother Tyrone Larkins is an Attica survivor and an Attica survivor coordinator. He's one of the people that we have to talk to whenever we want to make sure that we get representatives of people who live through that experience. And he has some other things that I'm hoping he can share that will uplift some of what the work of some of the survivors are doing right now. So welcome, panelists. Thank you all for joining this conversation today. I appreciate y'all making time.
It's great to be with us.
Wonderful. I want to start off by just sharing some of what we know are some contributing factors, and I want to ask you all to individually just chime in on some of these things, because we know that prison conditions, mass politicization in prison, awareness of global liberation movements, intentional strategies to organize people inside prison, and the impact of the murder of George Jackson are just some of the factors that contributed to the Attica uprisings. So I wanted to ask you, Brother Tyrone, specifically, can you share a little bit about what was going on in Attica pre-September 9th? What was happening? What were the dynamics, the things that actually led to brothers saying enough is enough, we are actually going to do these things?
Okay, Lumumba, first and foremost, thank you for having me. I want to take it back just a little bit further, if I can. We often talk about George Jackson and the murder over in San Quentin. However, we seem to forget his younger brother Jonathan, who was killed the year before in the Marin County courthouse while he was trying to get they said it was an escape attempt for the people that was incarcerated, and they said the premise for that attempt escape and kidnapping was to get his brother George out of prison, out of state prison. But Jonathan Jackson was killed in August, July of 1970, and that's the younger brother of George Jackson. And that information filtered into, I wouldn't just say Attica prison, but all prisons around in the United States. And 1 year later, George was killed. And George, behind his writings and what was being said and what he was doing inside of Quentin, resisting and all like that, became a linchpin for a lot of young guys, such as myself at the time, to say, okay, this is the way to do this thing. And George presented certain ideologies that might have been foreign to what, well, let me put it this way, be more specific. It was foreign to me. Because the first time somebody told me I was a lumpen proletarian, I didn't know what the hell they was talking about. And I got to breaking it down to me under Marxist theorems and all like that, so I began to accept it. And then when you start understanding and digesting what's happening in the prison system and how you're being treated, all of these situations led up to what happened in September 9th, 1971. Mm-hmm. And let me add just one, because a lot of people is misconstrued about that. You got people that's saying that this thing was planned. It was not planned. Mm-hmm. What happened in Attica happened because a culmination of a lot of abuse that was perpetrated on men that was confined, and it just blew up. That's what happened.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. I want to come back to that in a minute, because I would like to have you talk a little bit more about your introduction to some of the language and teachings of George Jackson, and how it was not just you. What was some of the other and the impacts it had on some of the other folks? But Heather Ann, if you can also talk about, because in your book you share a number of other factors that contributed to this. You talk also about some of the you talk about some of the things that were happening in the metal shop. You talk about some other stuff. We know that there was some men who were transferred from Auburn, who were attempting to do a Black Solidarity Day event. So there was a lot of stuff. Can you talk also about some of the other things that contributed to this prior to September 9th?
Sure. First, also, I want to say so much thank you for having me as well. And Tyrone, hello. It's good to hear your voice.
Haven't seen you since Ontario.
That's right. That's right. It's been a year, and it's good to hear your voice. I am, we could turn this over to Tyrone to tell us exactly what led up to it, because of course he was there. But what I can share is that, as Tyrone points out, there were so many things going on that was, setting a stage to make people understand that the breaking point was imminent, right? There was abuse day in, day out, not just in Attica, but in the California prison system, actually in every prison system. And if you want to kind of get a sense of what led to Attica, doesn't actually take much imagination. It's imagining any prison today right now. Day in, day out, capricious management of the facility, day in, day out, not treating people like human beings, day in, day out, denying people basic visitation, day in, day out, not feeding people well, not giving them basic medical care, not treating people like human beings. I mean, I can't sort of say it more basically than that. And in addition to that, you had men who were really aware of what's going on the outside, which is, again, interestingly similar to this moment, right? Just like today, there's this really important, movement outside. Think George Floyd, Summer Outside, activism outside, all the work that this organization is doing outside to shut Attica down. That was also true in 1971, all this really important activism going on outside where people are like, no more. And so you mentioned what was going on at other facilities like Auburn, the demand to have a day of recognition, Black solidarity, a day, and management basically saying in the prison, no, it's not going to happen. And the folks inside saying, look, it's just a day. It's just a day where we just want this moment of recognition outside. These are all things that led to a sense of solidarity, a sense of purpose. But as Tyrone points out, on the day it jumps off, as so often is the case, it's prison management who just one more time, too many, just pushes that envelope, right? And just pushes human beings to the breaking point. And this touches off really one of the most extraordinary human rights struggles in American history, but one that I think it's worth pointing out at some level goes on every single day on the inside. And it's a tradition that, is why we're all here still today. And it's really important that we, realize it was amazing and it's really important to commemorate, but was something that is a tradition, it was a real tradition inside of standing together and fighting back.
That's right. Thank you for that. Sister Sophia, if you can you share also just some of what is happening on the outside? We know that there are a number of things that are happening. We hear about what is going on inside, but what's happening in 1971, not just in New York State, but in the country. There are a number of factors that are also contributing to what the men inside are experiencing.
Well, thank you for the question. Before I answer, I have to really express my appreciation also to Heather, my co-conspirator, and to Tyrone, my other co-conspirator, as we work together with many other co-conspirators to shut down Attica. But to focus on the point that you were raising, remember, about what was happening in the country. First of all, the civil rights movement was in full effect in the 60s. And then 1968 comes and Dr. Martin Luther King is murdered. And the country explodes in, some say civil unrest, some say riots, whatever you want to call it. Nobody can argue against the fact that the country was up in arms and there was a lot of protests in the streets everywhere. That kind of set the stage. And then in 68, the founding of the Black Panther Party for self-defense. People standing up and saying, we're going to resist, we're not going to take this anymore. We have a right to be treated like basic, decent human beings, and our communities are no longer going to be compromised and marginalized and ignored, and our basic human rights are going to be respected. With that also came other organization formations, like the Young Lords, like the Brown Berets and other organizations around the country standing up for the rights of their community. So the activism on the outside was, I would say, in tandem with the activism that was growing inside the prisons. So it was almost like a symbiotic relationship. People from the streets were being arrested and brought inside. People were becoming politicized and reading more. So there was a general increase in political awareness around the country. And that helped to inform the understanding that people had both on the outside and the inside, that collectively coming together, they could bring about change. And I think that although Attica was what happened in Attica was spontaneous initially, and I like learning from Tyrone and many other brothers who were in Attica, everyone says, no, it wasn't planned ahead of time, but everyone had eventually got that sense of, we've got to stick together. And if we do so, we might have a chance of gaining our basic human rights and having them respected.
Mhm. Thank you for that. Brother Tyrone, first of all, thank you for joining us on Zoom. I'm glad we were able to fix that. I appreciate it. Appreciate your patience for,
Good. And it came through. I just want to
please.
attach something to what Sophia, my dear colleague, had to say. Hey, Sophia,
Hey, Tyrone, it's good to see you
great seeing you.
again.
Great to see you again.
Mhm.
From a historical basis on that line of thinking, one of my better friends, and I can call him a dear friend, who I met in Attica Yard on the 8th of September, was Sam Melville, White Panther. He was a hell of a guy. And him and I, you know, we started the dialogue because I was a Panther in the making, a Black Panther in the making. I was being taught what a lumpen proletarian was and all this and negating them. And it was boring to me to a large extent, you know, because I wasn't willing to sit down and listen until I started listening to Sam. Sam told me on the ground level, hey, man, you know, it's all right to be angry, but it's all right. It's even better to be smart. So you read. And I was cool with that. And I seen Sam die in Attica Yard also. Let me add that. But to go back even a little further, the year before, in May of 1970, before Jonathan was killed, there was a spot over there in Ohio by the name of Kent State. I know you should be should be familiar with that. And there was these college students that was putting dandelions in National Guard's rifles. And it was protesting the war, the Vietnam War. And do you know, the National Guards opened up on them and 4 of them was killed. And Crosby, Stills, and Nash, and I believe the Isley brothers made a song out of it, 4 Dead in Ohio. 4 Dead in Ohio. All this led up to Attica. This was a national thing. I mean, we center on Attica because of the prison and the brutality and then the dramatization, well, maybe drama is the wrong word, terms of how it was visualized, particularly what Stanley Nelson did. But this is symbiotic, and I got to use your term, Sophia, of everything that was happening, not only in America, but clear across the world. A lot of people was not happy with America being involved with Vietnam. A lot of people, okay? And the ironic part about it, we highlight the racial standpoint, but you know what? We also looked at a class standpoint. And that's when the intelligentsia started coming into play to say, start looking at it from the whole perspective. And we did. We did.
I want to ask you, because you're going in a certain direction that I want us to go. In spring of 71, there was also a manifesto that was drafted. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because again, this happens, you know, before the actual uprising. Talk a little bit about that process and how that actually related to this eventual uprising.
Okay. You know, it's ironic. One of my dear friends and Conrad, he's no longer with us, perhaps in spirits, was on a underground committee in Attica that wrote up the manifesto. And that was after the metal shop strike in 1970. Herb Blyden, God bless his soul, Herb Blyden, and a couple of other brothers who I've called the intellectual elite from B Block was on the committee that wrote the Attica Manifesto that was given to Russell G. Oswald, the same guy that brought you to Attica, right? And I say it straight up, the same guy who was the messenger from Rockefeller and Tricky Dick Nixon was the commissioner of correction at that time. And he was given that manifesto. And the manifesto aired out certain grievances that the whole prison system that was affecting the whole prison, not just Attica, but every prison in the state of New York. And let me add, just for the point of information, there was only 11 facilities in New York State at the time. 5 maximum securities, 5 reformatory, and 1 women's facility, 1 female facility.
I'm going to ask you to say that again. There were how many facilities at that time?
11, 5 maximum security,
Wow.
5 reformatory, and 1 female facility, which ratchets up to I know that it'll go into the conversation of, well, how many people was locked up? Well, there was only 11,000 people locked up in New York State. When Attica blew up, there was only 11,000 people locked up in New York State. When I left prison in 1997, and I'm gonna say, dude, I'm not toting my arm or blowing my chest up, because those was years that was taken from me. When I came out of prison after doing 29 years, there was over 80,000 people locked up in New York State. This became a big money grab. And I think Lumumba, I don't know if you're going to move to that or what, but from 1971, there was only 11,000 people to 1997, when there was close to 80,000 people locked up. A lot of folks was getting paid in the criminal injustice system.
Mm-hmm. 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 Absolutely. Well, we are going to go to that. But I wanted to ask you, Heather, can you talk also a little bit about what you found in terms of the impact of the manifesto? You know, through your research, I know you shared a lot about how it was utilized, how it was shared. Can you talk a little bit about what else you discovered in terms of the utilization of the manifesto?
Well, what was kind of extraordinary about it was, you know, as Tyrone says, this is a manifesto that lays out not only the problems in Attica, but really points to the fact that these institutions are brutal across the board, and calls out the administration, right? Tyrone really calls it out and says, look, you know, these places are unfit, and we are calling on the administration, by the way, not to go home, nothing particularly radical, just make them humane. I mean, you know, the calling out of it was pretty basic. And one of the most striking lines in the manifesto is, we are trying to do this in a democratic fashion. It's really this kind of powerful line in the manifesto.
Yeah.
We are coming together, and we are basically coming together as men inside of Attica, essentially pointing out the problem and saying, you know, here's the problem. We're telling you we need it fixed. And what is kind of extraordinary is the blind eye, right? That gets completely turned to this. And not only that, but that doubles, the administration just doubles down on the abuse, right? Tyrone, anyone who's got a copy of this manifesto gets their cell turned over. People get it ripped out of their cells, and yet that doesn't stop it, right? It doesn't stop people from organizing. It just makes them understand what the stakes are. That even if you're asking for basic things like, you know, I need to see a doctor or whatever, that you're going to, what's the response going to be? The response is going to be even more brutality. And, you know, the thing that Docs has never kind of understood is that that's not going to shut it down, right? That's just going to make people even more determined to stand together. And on the eve of the Attica uprising, you had, you know, as Tyrone's pointing out, right? You've got Panthers, you've got Weather Underground, you got Young Lords, you got 5%, you got all kinds of folks in there in various organizations and groups, and, you know, educating and you know, in the yard, you know, but there's something that happens getting closer and closer to Attica after George gets murdered. There's something that happens where people just kind of make this, you know, they put it aside. You know, on the day that this jumps off, people come all out into the yard together. They actually elect people out of each of the cell blocks to speak for each of the cell blocks up at the negotiating table. You know, across this yard, people putting aside a lot of the political differences, a lot of the, you know, historic differences in the yard, because the one thing that was pretty clear was this is the moment where we got to bring the nation outside in to see what this place is really like and stand together and really change it. And the thing about Attica was, why it's so important is that for those long 4 days and 4 nights, you know, there was a lot of possibility to really change things. The observers in there, the men inside, the media inside, the world was watching. And I don't think what a lot of people understood now looking back on it was that at that moment, I think, you know, there was a huge amount of support, a huge amount of support. People were like, wow, that's what's going down in there. This is wow.
Mhm.
And when the governor does decide to go in, and by the way, against the advice of everybody, including his own top aides, decides to go in, that is at a moment when it is looking like just about everything on those list of demands is going to be settled. Everything is some real progress can be made, but man, there's no way that he's going to let that happen.
Mhm.
And that you know, those kind of the stakes here is just really extraordinary. The solidarity in that yard. I mean, and that's Tyrone. I love Tyrone when you talk about that, because that is something that is, you know, we talk a lot about the repression that happens at Attica, but I don't think we talk enough about that moment. We don't talk enough about what it took to bring the people together in that moment.
Right. Well, you know what? I want to get there, but before we do that, I don't want to take for granted or assume that people know what the demands were. I don't want to assume that
Good
people
point.
knew what the manifesto laid out. So, Sophia, can you also just chime in and share what were some of the basic points that people were demanding? Like, because we're not talking about any outlandish kind of requests. We aren't talking about privileges. We're talking about basic human necessities. Can you share a little bit about what?
Yes, I will. So I think one of the demands that just elevates to the top for me is a demand to have more than one roll of toilet paper a month. I mean, that to me just like lays out the most basic human right violation, that someone has to take over the prison in order to get more than one roll of toilet paper a month. People are asking for basic quality medical care, dental care. I can tell you to this day, quality dental care doesn't happen in any prison, any place in this country.
Mm-hmm.
Educational programs, vocational programs, more exercise training, vocational training on equipment that's not obsolete. To this day, that's still a problem in the New York State prison system. So these things, these basic things, to have visits, to have quality visits with family members, to have family members not mistreated and abused and treated inhumanely when they came to visit, still a problem to this day. But those are the kind of basic things that people were asking for back in 1971. Like, as you said, nothing outlandish. Interestingly enough, people were not demanding to be freed.
Right.
Okay?
And you would think that
They
that's
were-
what people would expect, but that was not it. Right.
They were not demanding to be freed, nor, as all the accounts that I've heard, people were not trying to escape during the uprising. Now, some might argue the way Attica was built, that might have been impossible, but you would think there were hostages. Certainly people could have tried, but people were focused on the inhumanity that they were suffering from. And if I might just take one moment, going back to the question you asked me earlier, about what was going on, at the same time that Governor Rockefeller partnered up with Nixon, they decided it was okay and a good idea to go in and murder the people who were in Attica. What was happening on the outside was there was COINTELPRO, the counterintelligence program that the FBI started by the infamous J. Edgar Hoover, was launching against all kinds of political formations on the outside. There was like shoot to kill orders against members of the Black Panther Party and other political formations around the country. So it's not out of context that Rockefeller felt comfortable to just go and order the murder of people inside Attica because the head of the FBI was comfortably ordering the murder of members of the Black Panther Party, the Young Lords, Weather Underground, and other formations across the country for years.
Mhm, mhm. I appreciate that. Yeah. And so, Brother Tyrone, Heather raised, and I was actually going to go there as well. The solidarity that existed, the fact that this was not planned. And as an organizer, I can really appreciate the ability of folks who have the foresight and vision to plant the seeds for things. Because as organizers, we know that our task is to seize the time when the time comes, right? We may not be able to, in some cases, plan things, but when the opportunity comes, you have planted enough seeds for things to actually begin to move. Can you share a little bit about this solidarity that Heather is talking about that existed? That didn't just happen spontaneously, right? We know that there were dynamics between men within the prison, but some things shifted where folks were committed to standing together. Talk a little bit about what that solidarity experience was, and then I'm going to ask you if you're okay with talking about what your personal experiences were during the uprising.
Okay, simple. Let's go back to dear brother George. Let's go back to George Jackson. When George was killed in San Quentin, when he got his brains blown out, saying that he had a gun in his afro. 2 days later in Attica prison, I would say 98% of everybody confined in that facility did not eat for the whole day.
I'm going to ask you really quickly because I want to interrogate the 98% of almost everybody. Now, the racial makeup of Attica at that time is not all Black and brown. So that means
no, and that's a misnomer because of what was said at the end. Like I said, if you understand what Stanley Nelson did with his film and with the picture, and when he depicted Nelson and Nixon having the conversation. Nixon, it was the Black guys that did it. He went on to say that it was not that. That's what they wanted to believe, okay? Because they know who the people they had locked up. But nonetheless, 98% of the prison population in September of 1971 participated on a hunger strike for 1 day. We did not eat anything in the mess hall. 98% of the entire population. The other 2%, well, some guys just want to be rebellious and they do what they do. And that was okay, because I can tell you, no harm came to them. Yes, the choice you made, the majority made the choice to say, you know what, we don't like what happened to George Jackson. And that's 1,500 miles away. We're in New York State. He was in California, and we went on a hunger strike. So all this was adding up to the solidarity and the unification of the convict in Attica prison.
And so, go ahead, please continue. Yeah.
I was going to say, just to latch on to what Sophia said, yeah, it was a big thing about getting one roll of toilet paper a month. One roll of toilet paper a month, and you got to make that last. Yeah, and real talk. What about a bar of soap about maybe as big as your hand once a week? What about a little cup of toothpaste powder that you get once a week? What about taking a shower once a week? And that's in the course of the day. Give you the example. At that time, I was assigned to the metal shop in B Block, in the metal shop. I remember the company I was on, we took showers Wednesday morning at 10 o'clock for 25 minutes. In other words, 42 men that was on my the tier that I locked on took a shower for 25 minutes. And everybody didn't jump in the shower at one time. I didn't say I had a 25-minute shower. As people was coming out, you took the shower. And that was once a week. And you put on your same dirty clothes and you went back to work. That's how it was in Attica prison. And for the most part, in every prison in the state of New York that I've been in during those times.
Mhm. Mhm.
So we
So,
talk
ahead.
about conditions. These are the things that was added up. And that was all part of the manifesto as well.
Mhm. So talk to me about the actual uprising. And I want to do this carefully because what I don't want to do is spend too much time sensationalizing this. And I also know that this is traumatic and I don't want to, dig deeper into that. But I would like for you to share as much as you are willing to, your experiences when the uprising happened.
Oh, when it happened, I was in the metal shop, and all of a sudden we heard the siren going off, the escape siren, because 5 months prior to that, a guy escaped. People talk about Attica as an escape. One guy did get out of Attica, and they locked the jail down, couldn't find the guy, and he got busted about a year later because he was from New York. Joe Sullivan escaped out of Attica in April of 1971. So anyway, and the escape horn's gone. So I'm hearing this, oh wow, somebody done got up out of this place. But then I started noticing the police, or the correction officers, what it was called prison guards at the time, they started huddling up together. And it looked like they was trying to get to the door. And people started noticing that because the metal shop door was locked. And wouldn't you believe it, 5 minutes later, I seen guys I've never seen before in the prison, because Attica was constructed as is 4 prisons in one. And you never seen guys, I mean, for years on end. And I could be locked in B block, another guy could be locked in the A or D or C block. You may never see them, particularly if they never came to the mess hall. And I'm seeing guys, oh, what's going on? I'm seeing knives, bats, and everything else. And then, instinct tell you this is it. It's on. It's on. And once the metal shop doors got broken down into, people was taken hostage. I mean, I'll be quite clear, and I'm sure you can read between the lines. They wouldn't say, well, you be my hostage for the day. No, they was taken to be hostages, and they was rounded up in a very cordial fashion. And you know what? It was decided that basically everybody should be in D block. Ask me how that got there. I don't know. But everybody got to B block, and D block rather, and that's where all the voting and everything else that to demonstrate what democracy is all about.
Mm.
Guys was not appointed leaders to say because I'm a leader. Each people in that was in that yard had the opportunity to vote on people who they thought could represent them both in writing and in articulation. That's why the people that you seen that was at the negotiating table, they were some of the best of the brightest that was in the Attica prison system. You heard some of the speeches, you heard some of the things, you heard L.D. Bartley, you heard some of or might have read of some of the demands that was written right there. You heard of Jerry Rosenberg, who was actually our first lawyer, jailhouse lawyer. And started interpreting things that was happening. Why? Because people inside looked up to these guys to be, you know what, these guys are smart. They can express it, they can say it, and they can say what I feel. They became the leadership.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm gonna I'm gonna ask you all just really quickly, Safiya and Heather, can you talk? Because I want to ask, while this is happening inside, what is happening on the outside? How are people responding to the uprising? How are people hearing about it? And then also, what's the difference in terms of what's actually happening, what people are hearing? And then what's the response from the community out in the street? Safiya, I'm going to ask you first, and I'm going to pivot to Heather.
Well, several things are happening. First, we haven't talked about the fact that the men inside asked for observers to come from the outside in.
Yes.
And people came. People from the religious community, the media community, were called in to Attica to observe what was going on. And I've had the opportunity to speak to some of those observers, and they are just as shocked at what they observed. As they express how inhumane people were being forced to live in Attica. That was not, I think, what they expected, and they had tremendous respect for the fact that the men made sure that the hostages were protected, that no harm was going to come to them, that they were organized, and that their demands were reasonable. And they were also and remain mortified by the fact that the governor ordered the taking of the prison, something that everybody knew was going to end in a bloodbath. So the presence of the observers from all walks of life, I think, was a very important thing. And at the same time, and I'm sure Heather and Tyrone will speak to this, there were family members of the guards gathered outside the prison who were calling for the storming of the prison at the same time.
Yes.
Now, with that, I'm going to turn the virtual mic over to Heather and Tyrone.
Heather, please, then want to hear from you, Tyrone.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's exactly right. It was a bizarre situation that on the one hand, you've got the most productive negotiations going on. You've got this enormous team of negotiators, tent city of people hanging on the words of this negotiating team of folks up at this table, hammering out the points of these most important demands that are coming out of the blocks. You've got observers, as Sophia says, from all over. You've got, I mean, these are Republicans, Democrats, grassroots activists, religious leaders, a US congressman. You've got everybody there. And these people, even if they came in a little skeptical, by the time they've spent any time with the brothers on the inside, they're like, look, these guys need this this thing settled, and they need it settled their way because these demands are just. You've got hostages on the inside that the more they listen to what's being discussed up at this table, they're like, look, these guys need this. This is basic stuff. When they're interviewed by the media, they say, you know, look, this is, yeah, you know, this makes sense to us. These guys, this is pretty basic, settle with these guys. And this is going on the one hand, yet on the other hand, every state trooper battalion in upstate New York is descending on Attica. They are passing out weapons like candy. Nobody is writing down serial numbers deliberately. If someone's trying to write down anything, they are told to rip it up. They are seething with anger. The FBI is on the scene passing out rumors. They are getting people ramped up, riled up, telling them that atrocities are going on the inside that are not going on the inside. There is keep in mind, everybody, this is a state prison. This is a local small town, and yet not only is the FBI there, but the FBI is sending teletypes on a daily basis, not just kind of to the local field office, but to the president, the vice president, the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the Marines, the CIA, to the top echelons in every branch of the military. There is reconnaissance going on. There are reports going on. What are the Panthers doing? What's going on in Chicago with the head of the Young Lords Party? I mean, I've looked at all these documents. They are on this at the most highest level of surveillance. And you've got the Rockefeller administration frothing at the mouth, trying to figure out how are they going to get in there and shut this thing down. So all of this is going on at the same time. But meanwhile, the American people, while we had now looked back at it and we're told, oh, this is American people, they're ready to vote for war on crime. And I'll say, what's interesting, this is American people that have put a moratorium on the death penalty. They've actually already started the process of de-escalating the prison population. As Tyrone points out, we are actually on the downswing of prison population, interestingly enough. Civil rights, a lot of people hate it, a lot of right wing, a lot of white supremacists out there in this country always have been, not looking good in 71 either. But the thing of it is, you look at polling data, they're kind of on the downswing. So what happens? Well, one thing that happens is the Rockefeller administration, the Nixon administration, they see this power in the yard and they're like, holy, we got to shut this down because too much sympathy for it, too much power behind it. And that's a lot of what we're about. You know, this is what we're talking about.
That's right.
We didn't end up here by accident. We ended up here in a lot of good reason, because they saw that power on the inside. And that's something that's just really hard to get our heads around. It's really hard now to look back on it and understand that, you know, there was a real important backlash to what happened inside of that yard. But what happened inside of that yard was pretty amazing at the same time. And this kind of, you know.
Well, let's do that, because again, I don't want to take for granted or assume that everyone knows what happened in that yard. Brother Tyrone, can you share as much as you're willing to what did happen?
You've seen Strawberry Fields Forever. I like to go back to the Beatles because that was the music of that time. You didn't see the atrocity, you didn't see people killing hostages or anything like that. As a matter of fact, that became the biggest lie that was ever told. On the 13th, and I'll take it to the 13th because that's indicative of everything, of the culmination of what happened in Attica prison. The biggest lie told outside the wall was that prisoners was emasculating the hostages, they was cutting their throats, they was doing all types of things to them, so forth, etc. And when the stormtroopers came in and was shooting, and by the way, I don't really like talking about it, but it's true. It's a matter of record. I got shot 3 times. As a matter of fact, a fraction of the inch from where my hands was laid on my head. Shotgun blast, double aught, just scraped my skull. A fraction of an inch more, I would be a vegetable because it would have gave me a lobotomy. Doctor told me that. Anyway, the greatest lie ever told was that all the hostages had their throats cut and they were stabbed up and those type of things. I happened to be in the hospital 2 days later when the coroner from Rochester did the autopsies on the hostages first. Then he did the autopsies on guys that was in green or gray, I should say, at the time. And he said, not one hostage had their throat cut. Not one hostage was emasculated. Not one hostage was stabbed to death. They all died from gunshot wounds. Okay. Do you know to this day that coroner was banished from Western New York, from Rochester? He was banished from Western New York because he told the truth. He told the truth. Okay. And see, when we look at Attica in this total scope, yeah, we could talk about the unity, we could talk that nobody, you know, the good things that happened, so forth, etc. in the yard. One of my best experiences in the yard, I believe it was on the 12th. I was walking at that night, I should say, and I see Bill Kunstler. Bill Kunstler walked the yard by himself. He did not have an escort. I mean, people was around him. But he felt so carefree because his heart was in the right direction. And he was talking to people. Hey, man, what's going on? How you doing? Da, 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 da. Yeah, we're going to try to make certain things happen. This was the type of guy he was. And I was in awe behind this guy. I mean, heard about him, you know, would have loved to have him for my attorney. But just saying, see how he responded in that type of thing. And you could see that this was not no front. As a matter of fact, I give kudos to every negotiator that came in to the prison because they didn't come out of fear. They came to see certain humanitarian factors come about from the state of New York. Unfortunately, it didn't happen because when they was locked out of the prison on the 12th, and well, the night of the 12th midnight, and to the 13th, they knew what was getting ready to happen. Everybody in the world knew what was getting ready to happen. And it happened. It did. Now, what happened after that? Okay. The brutality of us going to the hospital or going to the box was atrocious. Some people was left to die. Some people said some people was marked to be killed. I happen to believe that. I believe Sam Melville had an expert on his head. I believe the guy that said that did the poem "If We Must Die" would had a mark on his head, among others. Okay, but from overall standpoint, I mean, you take a shotgun and stick it in a barrel and pull the trigger, somebody's going to get hurt. A lot of people in that barrel is going to, and that's what happened. That's what happened.
And we now know, once we finally got some access to the records, and it's taken 50 years to do it, 45 years to do it, we know that they knew that. I mean, everybody, of course, on the ground knew it too already. But now, you know, we know on the outside that they knew they were going to kill everybody. They knew that and wound everybody. 128 people shot, sometimes 6, 7 times. They knew it. Rockefeller was told he was going to kill his own state employees. They knew it. They did it anyway. And that's one of the reasons why the records are still sealed. It's one of the reasons why Attica's still open. It's one of the reasons why the fight's still on, because there's a lot of trauma there, and they don't want the fight to still go on, because there's a whole lot that they don't want people to know about. But that's all the more reason why it's got to be shut down. It's all the more reason why that fight still has to be finished.
That's right. First of all, thank you for sharing that, Brother Tyrone. I appreciate that. Thank you for chiming in, Heather. Sophia, can you talk about this and sort of bring this home? We heard the atrocities, we heard the trauma. How does that inform what we know as this mandate now to shut down Attica? Why? Why now?
Well, I think it is our calling to demand that human rights violations and abuses are ended. And torture that happened in 1971 in the prisons, unfortunately, there's torture in the prisons of New York State today. And I can tell you, just in the hour that we've been on this Zoom, somebody somewhere in some prison in this state has having the daylights beaten out of them by somebody who's paid with tax dollars in one of these prisons, because it is condoned, it is allowed, it is assumed that if you go to prison in New York State, you're going to be abused. And if you go to Attica, it is deemed to be like the extra punishment in incarceration. So it is important that all of us do everything possible to end these abuses. When people are convicted and sent to prison, the taking of their liberty is the punishment. All these other abuses, none of that appears any place in any penal code. None of it is legal, none of it is allowed, but it is assumed. And as Heather, I think, said earlier, a blind eye is turned to it. The torture that happened to the men in Attica following the uprising was unspeakable. Anybody who ever had a moment to speak to Frank Big Black Smith heard him describe the unspeakable torture that he was subjected to while being tied to a metal gurney naked and have cigarette butts extinguished all over his body, and many other atrocities. But people are being waterboarded in prisons in New York State today, and tortured and beaten and maimed and murdered. And we all must raise our voices to stop that.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that. I initially put in the chat that we were going to take some questions, but I see that there aren't questions, and we have also reached the hour. So I'm going to ask our panelists to just give us some closing words about the mandate. Sophia, thank you for setting that off. Heather, I'm going to ask you, and I want to end with you, Brother Tyrone. But Heather, can you share a little bit about what the mandate is? Like, your book lays out, perfectly what the atrocities were, what the cover-ups were. How does that inform, again, just this mandate to shut Attica down once and for all?
Well, I can't say it as well as Sophia did, for sure. It is, to me, it isn't just that it's a long legacy that began, certainly came to came to a really powerful climax in 1971, but began long even before that. People behind bars have been struggling forever to be recognized as human. So to me, it's a long struggle that has been there forever, and it's one that we all have an obligation to keep reminding ourselves and reminding the people that make the laws in this country that in my view, human beings don't belong in cages, full stop. And Attica is one of the worst places of cages in New York State. And in part, it's because of the history of this place. And so we do have an obligation to make sure that that place as a trauma site is shut down. But one of the reasons why it is our obligation, why the mandate is so important in my view also, is that, and Sophia said this, we are the people, this goes on in our name, to put it as bluntly as possible, as citizens of this country, as taxpayers in this state, this goes on in the names of the people who support it, just ostensibly supported by sending people there to serve time. That cannot be allowed. These are places that are public institutions, and as public institutions, they cannot be allowed to be run this way. And if they're going to insist on being run this way, then they must be shut down. It is that simple. And this one is one of the worst egregious offenders of human rights, and therefore it is that simple to me.
Thank you for that. Brother Tyrone, we know that usually people who are trying to obtain closure, justice, that there needs to be some material shifts in things. Can you talk to me as a survivor of the attacks on Attica, what it would mean for Attica to be closed to you? You're on mute. I'm trying to unmute you, but.
Symbolically, it would say, I would say kudos to Sophia. That's a good thing. Same token, I'm trying to be a balanced thinker. I realized what would happen to Wyoming County, where Attica is located at. I know a lot of folks will be out of work. I know that. So you, in certain respects, we have learned to be critical thinkers and to balance what action, what reaction that would have. I would like to see it close. I would like to see the mentality of the whole prison system change. And that segues into this here. Sorry, I got to give myself my own little point on this one. I'm president of the Attica Memorial Foundation. We're having our opening address on the 10th of September, Saturday, at the Trinity Immaculate Church that's on Wall and Broadway. If you cannot come at 3 o'clock, you can get their website and they'll give you a way to for their own Zoom link. You can get on it. Then I had to do that, Lumumba, because I know
I was going to ask you to do it before we got off. So thank you for taking time to do that. But go ahead.
Yeah. But to say why I'm still involved with this here after all those years, look, yesterday was my past. My future is wide open, and I work strategically. I work for the Kings County District Attorney's Office as a counselor helping young men. And my motto is, I don't want my past to be your future. Okay. So knowing where I came from and knowing that there's a brighter future for these youngsters, that's how I use Attica, to say as a negative and positive of the things they shouldn't do to be a better person. Because if we start somewhere with this ideal population, perhaps the prison population has been going down. Maybe we can make it lesser. Maybe we can stop a little more shootings in our communities and things of that nature. So it's hands on. I can't be mad. I'm not even mad at Rockefeller no more. I'm not mad at Tricky Dick no more. I can't be. I can't take that anger with me into the next day. If anything, to be progressive, to do certain things. People of who I used to run with, Oh man, you work for the yeah, I work for the DA. I'm not putting people in jail. I'm trying to keep people out of jail. Big difference. So let's use what we got for our vantage point of helping all. And that's me. That's where Attica is with me today.
Mhm. Well, thank you for that. I appreciate that. And I'm hoping that people were able to get the information about the program on the 10th. I'm going to encourage you all to join that. I want to, first of all, just thank you all for taking time to do this, because you've shared a lot with us. You have given us a lot to think about, but also I think you have put us in a place where we have to, we have a sort of a charge. And I think you all touched on this a little bit, in that we have to begin to figure out what our responsibilities are in terms of preventing another Attica uprising. But even way before that, how do we participate in the decarceration of the prisons in New York State? What is our responsibility to make sure that we begin to roll this back? You know, what you said is profound. In 1971, there were 11 prisons in New York State. There are dozens now. Dozens. So we really have a responsibility to do this. And part of that responsibility also is to imagine what can be in existence in its place. So while we think about how this will impact Wyoming County, we know that some of the best economists will tell you we have about a dozen different alternatives that can be existing and erected in the place of Attica that will not only help keep the employment, but will actually provide more economic growth, more than a prison actually could. And so for us to begin to really imagine not only what Wyoming County can look like and be like, but what can New York State look like and be like? What can this country look like and be like if we've committed ourselves to decarcerating this state? And so I want to thank you all. And I'm going to invite you all also, all of you who are listening, to participate and log on to some of the other programs we have. Like I said, this is the first of 6. The next thing that we are going to be doing will be tomorrow. We'll do a Twitter chat tomorrow afternoon. So please follow Shutdown Attica on Twitter. We're going to also do September 10th, a social media blitz, again, from that same handle. And then September 11th, I'm really excited about this. We have a few of the folks who are going to be on this panel with us today, but we're going to have a discussion about the role of families in supporting folks in prison. And that title is called "We Got Your Back." And so we'll have Sister Takesha, my colleague and comrade, with Sister Akira, and then Sister Ruth also. So please make sure you tune into that. That's going to be an IG Live, so I'm going to need you to follow the Shutdown Attica Instagram handle so that you can get that information and know where to find everything. And then on September 12th, we're going to take some time to talk about our victories. When we talk about shutting down Attica, most people think it's impossible. Most people think that, well, you can never do that. And so we're going to share stories of people who've actually were victorious in shutting down jails, shutting down prisons across the country, and begin to really demystify this idea that it is impossible. Because I always take pride in saying that we have done the impossible before, and we sure as hell going to do it again. So I invite you to join that discussion on the 12th. And then we're going to close out this series on the 13th with panelists, folks who are currently doing some of this work around decarceration. We'll have Greg Mingo from RAP. Safia will join us again, and then we'll be joined by another Attica survivor, Brother Che Nieves. So I am inviting you to please come back and just know that after the 13th, we'll have another task for you. We want you to join the work that is going to be taking place to finally and permanently shut down Attica. So please join me in thanking our panelists. I appreciate you all taking time today on this evening. And I'm going to ask you all to please follow them, figure out how you can support them in their efforts. If you don't have Heather's book, what you're waiting on, please pick it up. And please, again, make sure that you are supporting the Attica survivors, make sure you're supporting AFJ, and thank you all for coming out. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Okay. Let me stop the recording because I do want to.